On Friday the 13th of September, I was sat in my office just doing boring admin work. And I remember hearing across the radio code red, which means that we've got an animal escape. I went to respond to it. But by the time I got down to the Capybara enclosure, which was only 200 metres roughly from where my office is, she was nowhere to be seen.
In September 2024, something unusual happened at Who Zoo in Telford, Shropshire. One of its most popular residents, Cinnamon, the capybara, made a break for it. And despite being a very chill animal, she caused absolute chaos on a global scale. I'm Rosie Holdsworth. Welcome to Wild Tales. Cinnamon, a capybara gone rogue. Will Dorrell and his wife Becky are co-owners of Who Zoo and Dinosaur World. Alongside an amazing team, they run this unique wildlife park that combines conservation, nature education and dinosaurs. Having actual animals wasn't enough, so they decided to throw in a few giant extinct ones too. Unlike most zookeepers, working with animals and nature wasn't really a career choice for Will. It was just home.
So my background is a bit different to a lot of people who come into the zoo industry. I was actually born into it. We're a family-run business, so I've literally spent my whole life growing up here. We opened in 1991, and I was born in 1991. Literally the last 35 years I've spent here. So I definitely have learned things through experience rather than through, going to college and getting sort of the qualifications and so on and so forth. Which is where it's very interesting between my wife and I, because she went to college and got all the proper qualifications and did things the proper way. Nowadays, my life isn't around the animals as much. I try to get with them as much as I can, but it's just not that practical. So my wife and I had to make the decision as to who dealt with the animals better. And I begrudgingly had to admit that she was better with animals than I was. So we made the decision that it was best for her to look after the animal side and then I could look after the admin side.
Now, let's jump to Friday the 13th of September, 2024. What seemed like a fairly normal day at the zoo turned out to be an incredibly unlucky one for Will.
I was sat in my office just doing boring admin work. And I remember hearing across the radio code red, which means that we've got an animal escape. I went to respond to it. But by the time I got down to the Capybara enclosure, which was only a couple of minutes, if that really, it's about 200 metres roughly from where my office is. And she was nowhere to be seen.
Meet Cinnamon, a furry capybara, and, depending on who you ask, a potential nature criminal. But before we go any further, what exactly is a capybara?
Capybaras are the world's biggest rodent, very closely related to rats and particularly guinea pigs. Think of a brown guinea pig the size of a Labrador. That's what you're dealing with. In the wild, they'd be found in Central and Southern America. Brazil particularly, around the Amazon, they're found a huge amount. They're amphibious near enough. They spend a lot of time in water. In the wild, they have to contend with jaguars, and their easiest way of escape is just dive into water and get away from them. In water, they do have to deal with caiman, but then they just get out of water to get away from them. You wouldn't want to be a capybara that's got to jump in the water to get away from a jaguar and then meet a caiman and then you've got to jump back out. I'm sure that doesn't happen too often. They can move between 20 and 25 miles an hour, which is pretty rapid, and they're basically just solid muscle. Pretty self-sufficient from day one. They're born with their eyes open, with fur, able to run around and everything else. So pretty early on, they're able to almost look after themselves. Cinnamon was born at the zoo actually on the 14th of September 2023, along with 3 other siblings. Her parents came to us originally from a zoo called Tropical Wing Zoo, based down in Kent. But they moved to us about 12 years ago now, so they'd been with us about 10 years when Cinnamon was born. We actually always suspected that mom and dad were both females. Capybaras, as with most rodents, but capybaras particularly, they're extremely difficult to sex. I won't go into too much detail on this podcast, but basically everything's internal. So unless you sort of manage to tickle the right spots, it's pretty much impossible to work out what sex they are. So we actually thought we had 2 females, and then all of a sudden we had some baby capybara born. They gave birth 14th September 2023, and it was actually coming up to her first birthday when she, little spoiler alert, escaped.
The Great Capybara escape case is officially open. Cinnamon is out there somewhere, alone, confused, nonchalant, but completely out of her element and away from her family and friends. She might not be dodging jaguars or caimans in Shropshire, but that doesn't mean she's safe. Zoos need to have very robust fences and cages. So the big question is, how did this happen?
The keeper who went in to mow her, he didn't use the double gate system correctly. So you're supposed to go in, shut one gate behind you, open the next gate, drive through with the tractor mower into her enclosure. And that means if ever she gets past that first gate, she's confined. Capybara in general aren't a animal that I would say particularly look to escape or get out of their habitats. Why would they potentially put themselves at risk when they've got everything where they need? You tend to get animals looking to leave because perhaps something has spooked them, or there could be infighting within the social dynamic in the group. What we suspect was the situation with Cinnamon is that as the tractor mower went in, it backfired, and we suspect that caused her to spook and just run blindly. And she just happened to run straight through where the gate being open. Almost instantly, we were like, right, this is going to be very difficult to find her. We searched the area, searched that whole paddock throughout that afternoon until it was going dark. Still couldn't find her. And at that point, we had to kind of confront the reality that she probably wasn't still in that paddock. She'd probably moved elsewhere. It's all, we have a good perimeter fence around the zoo, but animals are animals, and they will find holes that we don't even think exist. And in the end, we did actually find an area where a rabbit has probably gone over previously, and she'd created a bigger hole and slipped out. And that was the point where we realised, right, she's actually off-site.
The search for Cinnamon is officially underway. The team at Who Zoo are going to need all the help they can get, and quickly, to track down their fugitive rodent.
It really was a little bit like looking for a needle in a haystack, because where she'd gone into, even though it's woodland that we own, it's about 30 acres of woodland. It's, thick bramble hedges, lots and lots of undergrowth, ponds in there as well. She really could have been anywhere in there. So we mobilised all of our entire team, even down to the catering staff, had to stay behind and help. So there was about 25 to 30 of us searching different areas, and then also search areas outside the woodland, sort of the local country lanes, other water courses nearby. There's also another local zoo called Exotic Zoo, and all of their team came out to help look for her as well, which was really, really great. And then we had a local dog search and rescue group offer their help, and they have a thermal drone that they can bring up. I'm not joking, there was probably overall about 100 people involved in the actual search.
Despite the team's best efforts, Cinnamon is proving pretty good at staying hidden. With the search going nowhere, the team are forced to take things a step further.
We had no sightings on Saturday, no further sightings on Sunday, and it was at that point the decision was made to put out a public notice about her, and that's where everything kind of escalated from.
A giant rodent is on the loose.
This is Cinnamon,
the runaway,
and she's currently on the run after escaping.
We put the notice out on Facebook on the Sunday, I think Sunday the 15th, I think it was. Basically saying, look, this is what's happened. She's escaped. She's no threat to public, but please don't approach her because we don't want her to be spooked. We think we know roughly the area she's in, but we don't want her to be spooked further away. If you see her, please notify us. Here's the phone number.
And suddenly, Cinnamon is all over the news. Reporters across the country are joining the search for our furry fugitive.
I think I went to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, finally. Woke up at 5:30 to a phone call from the BBC National News Desk. Did everyone want to send a reporter out that morning? I literally hung up from them to have a phone call come through from ITV National News Desk, and almost immediately followed by Sky News, followed by Channel 5, and then all the radio stations. All of the locals around here were really supportive. They were really just great about it. Because they even had reporters knocking on the door asking them, what do you think, and so on and so forth.
But Cinnamon's fame doesn't stop there. The reaction online is even bigger. Capybaras are already hugely popular around the world, especially in places like China and Japan, where they've become something of a cultural icon. So it didn't take long for Cinnamon to become a full-blown social media sensation, riding the global capybara craze.
The social media reaction to her was, for lack of a better word, insane. We were running on about 1 or 2 hours sleep. we were just constantly tired. But every evening when we sort of just sit down, have some tea between searches, all of a sudden the memes and the GIFs would start getting pinged around by the staff that they'd seen on Facebook or seen on Instagram. The first really good one that I saw, it was a little animation of Louis Spence with his "You Can't Catch Me." That was absolutely hilarious. Yeah, the social media reaction was huge, and I'm sure we didn't see them all because there were just so many, but the majority were positive, and we just kind of loved it, really.
The media and public attention is helping to raise awareness, but Cinnamon is still out of sight. Everyone's doing what they can, but the search is far from over.
Once we tracked her down with drones, we sort of had an idea of where we were working in. We were talking about 30 metres by 10 metres, about 300 square metres of thick, dense brambles and everything else that we couldn't cut through. And we knew she was living under there because you could see tunnels of where she'd sort of pushed through. They got really thick skin, they're just bulky, they're fast, and they're great at sort of going under bushes and stuff, because that's what they have to do in the wild. She could move through vegetation that we absolutely couldn't.
Thermal drones become a key part of the search, and one of the most iconic moments shared by the media is an aerial video sighting of Cinnamon, just chilling on the grass, completely unfazed by the high-profile search party looking for her.
But I've got footage of it, it's great. She looked at the drone, seemingly almost as if it was just like an annoying fly. And I mean, this drone was, probably a good sort of 100 metres above her. And then she just turned around and just sauntered back into the woodland, no care in the world. But once she went into the woodland, we lost sight of her because the drone couldn't penetrate through the undergrowth.
It's already Wednesday, the 18th of September, 5 days since the initial escape, and Cinnamon is on the move again. Although the team still has a good idea of her location, the elusive capybara is, without knowing it, heading into more dangerous territory.
We had a bit of a concern because the paddock next door that she was moving into and eating grass is owned by the Ministry of Defence. And because of that, we were very worried about her moving too far that direction, because there was, potential talks of what might happen if she moved onto Ministry of Defence land properly.
Things are getting complicated. Will and the team have to make an important decision. The team lessen the intensity of the search so they can gather more resources, more ideas, and reach out for extra help. But as the days pass and progress slows, morale begins to dip.
We had an idea of roughly where she was, but we felt she was getting spooked by us constantly pestering and so on, and we were concerned about her moving further away. Thursday night, just because we didn't do search efforts doesn't mean that we stopped doing anything. We drove through the night, went down to London to go and pick up some specialist capture equipment. And on the way back at about sort of 1 o'clock in the morning, we had a phone call from one of our neighbours who said, "She's in our garden. Can you get here ASAP?" And I was like, "We're on the M25. I can't, but I'll call the team." By the time they got around there, she'd gone back into the woodland.
Once again, hope rises, only to slip away. Almost a week has passed, and our furry friend is still being elusive.
We got back from London about 3 a.m, 3:30 a.m, something like that, with equipment, and my wife and I decided to go around the woodland that night, very early hours of the morning. My wife spotted that the tracks were further out. There'd been a bit of action on the Ministry of Defence ground, and she was concerned that Cinnamon was actually moving away from there and was going to move potentially towards where there's a main road.
It feels like Cinnamon's rescue is turning into an impossible mission, but Becky's not ready to give up on it just yet.
She's a very, very determined lady, but I have never seen her more determined than on that Friday morning. And she went out and went into that woodland, and yeah, sure enough, about 2 o'clock that afternoon, I got a phone call from her saying, "I've got her, I know where she is, I know exactly where she is. We need a team down here right now to get her."
The showdown begins. Becky versus the wild, though very chilled, beast.
They both locked eyes with each other. Becky said a word that I can't put on a podcast. Cinnamon grunted, which we're pretty sure was also her equivalent of the same word, and jumped into the pond. And Becky was like, "Right, that's great. She's in the pond. I know where she is. I can see all around this pond. I just now need to get through to someone on the phone and get a team of people down here, and we can then work our way capturing her from there."
This is it. Another chance to rescue Cinnamon. Will and the rest of the team need to move fast, because if she panics now, they could lose her all over again. The clock is ticking.
But we also knew very early on that our best chance of capturing her was in water, which might sound counterproductive because ultimately these are animals that swim a lot better than we do. It was never going to be easy regardless of where it was, but we figured that the best chance was in water because at least then we could confine her. We knew, right, she's in that pond, we can set up a perimeter around that pond, let's say, and we can then work out from there. The pond was about 6 foot deep, so it's not shallow, and it was full of stagnant water, which wasn't the most pleasant thing in the world either. On the fly, we made a plan. So if you can imagine, the pond is primarily an oval, but there is like an offshoot on one bit where it narrows. And we're like, if we can get her up that offshoot, we can actually put the carry crate at the end of that offshoot and try and get her either to go into it by herself, or once we're there, we can, sort of get her into it. That was the plan. It's a lot easier saying it than doing it. There was no time to think. It was like, right, phone's on the side or whatever's electrical in your pockets on the side, and just jump straight in, fully clothed. It took us about 2.5 hours. We had to just gradually try and cut the pond down more and more, get her into the crate, shut the door, and then we can get her back to her family. So Cinnamon got out on Friday the 13th, and she was out almost to the hour, exactly a week.
Finally, all the effort pays off, and the mission to rescue Cinnamon is a success. Becky, Will, and the rest of the team are buzzing, and a trip to the pub feels like the perfect way to celebrate.
So it was really important that we got Cinnamon back, not just for her own welfare, but also the welfare of the wild animals in the area. The area that she escaped into, we set aside for British conservation. There's badgers, there's foxes, there's jays, hedgehogs. We think we've seen tracks of otters in there as well. So yeah, there's potentially a huge amount of diverse British wildlife in that area. And that wildlife isn't used to dealing with capybara. So she did come back and she had put on weight, so she was eating and looking after herself. But we're in September. Would she still have been able to look after herself come January, February, when we're dealing really, really, really cold weathers? Probably not. So it was really, really important that we recovered her.
But back at the zoo, the keepers watch carefully as Cinnamon rejoins her herd. After a week away, will the internet's newest diva get a hero's welcome?
They couldn't have cared less. Cinnamon's family really seemingly could not have cared less about her being back. I mean, I'm going to be honest, capybaras are great. I know everybody loves them, but they're not the most emotive of animals. Yeah, a lot of time you look at them, you don't really know what's going on there.
Our furry celebrity is back safe and sound, and the team can finally return to normal. Cinnamon's story has helped bring more attention to the park, while giving a real boost to its conservation and education work. But above all, it's about inspiring the next generation of nature lovers.
We strongly, strongly believe in conservation for education. We believe that by getting people hands-on, kids particularly hands-on with animals, it can help stoke a fire in them. That then means that as they get older, they're going to show more interest in looking after that species and looking after the planet.
As for our friend Cinnamon, she's remained safely inside her paddock, seemingly without a care in the world. But behind that unfazed expression, could she be cooking up another adventure? Thank you for listening to this episode of Wild Tales. If you've enjoyed it, why not give us a follow or leave us a review? And if you'd like to find out more about Who Zoo and get to know more about their conservation and education work, please head to the episode show notes. I'm Rosie Holdsworth. See you in the next episode.